well, first episode, let's go.
You know we're gonna like mess this up 300 times, but we're gonna try. Hey there, friends.
What's up, guys?
Welcome to our new channel, Darkly Dubious Diaries.
Otherwise known as Duh, Duh, Duh.
Ah. So for those who don't know me, my name is Tara Marie.
And I am Dayna Elizabeth.
And we both come from slightly different backgrounds. I have a YouTube channel called True Crime Matters with Tara Marie.
And I have got a TikTok, and it is just at Dayna Elizabeth Original, where I do true crime content.
But now we're teaming up to collaborate on talking about true crime stories and all kinds of mysterious stuff. So we're hoping you join us.
Yep, we love all the unsolved stuff. We love all the spooky stuff, the scary stuff, the ghost stories. So we're very excited to be doing this and sharing it with all of you guys as well.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. So for this first episode, we thought that we would just do a quick Q&A, little fun thing, get to know you kind of thing. So we're going to ask each other some questions and throw it back to each other and see what happens. Okay, so the first question is, tell us about yourself. So you go.
So I am from England, obviously by my wonderful accent. I am 30 years old. I have two lovely little dogs. They're two collies, Striker and Ziggy. They are my favorite in the whole world. I'm very, very into animals. Absolutely love animals. Always wanted to work with animals. Studied to work with animals. Found a job with animals. Hated it.
Oh, really?
Yep. Yeah. So I'd imagine sort of, working and having not close relationships with said animals, but, working with them. But a lot of the time it was very just clean them out and just get the food ready. And there wasn't very much interactions with the animals at all, other than when I got bit by a penguin. That was about the most interaction I had, which was
wow.
But yeah, we both go on.
How does that happen? How do you get bit by a penguin?
So I was working in a zoo at the time, and I had to feed the penguins. So I had this like tin bucket full of fish, and all the fish were face down and the tails were up. So you'd put your hand in and sort of grip, fish, and you'd just move your hand across the penguins, and the penguins would all come and grab them. And there was this tiny little penguin that wasn't getting any food, and I was like, I'm going to make sure you get one, because that's me.
Yeah.
I got this fish, and I went to pass it to this little like the little one at the back. And this big meaty boy comes running through like, that's my fish. And I was like, no. So I gave the little one the fish, and his beak came to snap the fish, but he got me instead.
Aww.
I thought it broke my hand.
I'm sorry. They always say no good deed goes unpunished. So there you go.
Exactly. I'm also a huge movie buff, series buff. I love anything true crime at all. I love anything horror, anything sci-fi. I'm a huge Whovian, which is Doctor Who, for all of those people out there that don't know what a Whovian is. I actually have multiple sclerosis, or MS. I don't know if anyone knows what it is. It's a disease that you get, and it is progressive. Anyone that has it will know it is very difficult to live with. But I get to enjoy my time and do things like this podcast and share my true crime things, which is, brings my life a lot of joy. So I enjoy all my TikToks. I enjoy spending time with the dogs, and I enjoy going on holidays, which is always nice. Getting some sun and traveling the world. That's about me. So I would now like Tara to tell you all about her.
Oh boy. So basically, I was born and raised in New Jersey, United States. You could probably tell by my accent, New Jersey. But yeah, I actually, like you, always had a love for animals. I grew up on a horse farm, and we had about 3.5 acres. When I was a child, it was the worst thing in the world because I had to clean these stalls in the wintertime. So it would be freezing cold, and we have to deal with cracking the ice on top of the buckets. I always knew since I was a little girl that I wanted to do film stuff because like you, I was a film buff myself. And I remember choosing broadcasting because I was like, at least I'll learn how to write. So if I don't do film, I can do news. So went to school for broadcasting and then kind of never used my degree. So I've been working for the same organization for 18 years. And slowly over time, they have put me in a position where I do like little do. Should I be saying no? Where I do create little videos for this nonprofit. So now I'm finally doing that in my career, but I'm a single mom. I have a now 10-year-old and 11-year-old. They're very close in age. They're very high energy. um, but yeah, that's pretty much every most big things about me. So
How about we tell everyone how we met?
so with my true crime channel, I was looking for some help. So I suddenly realized instead of like trying to hire people on Upwork or whatever, I was like, oh yeah, there's all these Facebook groups where there's all this true crime stuff. And there's so many people so passionate about true crime in these groups. So I knew I was probably going to get the question taken down because I went into one of the most popular true crime groups and posted that I was looking for, help or collaboration or whatever. And then, you popped in there. And then I looked at your page, your TikTok, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's hilarious. Like this is awesome.
The weirdest part of that whole situation was I wasn't even a part of that group.
All right.
It just, when you're on Facebook and you'll scroll and it'll say like, this is potentially what you might like.
Yeah.
And it was similar to sort of other true crime groups and whatnot that I'm in. The algorithm had pulled it round to say like, oh, look, and your post was the one that was sort of sponsored for it was so random. I would never have done that in a
That is
million years.
Well, thank you, Meta. Is that what it's called? Meta, whatever.
Facebook?
Facebook is good for something.
Yes, for once. Okay.
Okay. So why are you into true crime?
Big question. So I was always the kid at school who was the bullied one. I was always the kid at school who was, sort of into the stuff that everybody else wasn't into. I wasn't into the Barbie dolls. I was into drawing sort of chalk lines on the floor that looked like a guy who was laid on the floor. I watched a lot of programs when I was younger, sort of like I can't think of ones that US and UK would know, but like NCIS, true crime programs, series.
Totally. Mm-hmm.
And I used to sit watching them at like 7 years old. I remember watching Nightmare on Elm Street when I was like 8. Like I was always so into horror, so into true crime, so into like the psychology of murderers. Like what makes you want to do that? You don't just wake up one day with this hankering to like go kill someone. So I think the thing that really sort of pulled me into it was the psychology side of things. Because I sat and watched people who'd killed so many people with no remorse, with absolutely no empathy, with absolutely nothing, emotion wise, that I was so interested by how you could possibly be alive, be a person if you couldn't, have the normal brain function. And that was always very interesting to me. So I started with that. Then I started getting into, like the unsolved mysteries. And I was very obsessed with Jack the Ripper when I was younger. I loved that story. That was such a good one. Yeah, just everything that ties into true crimes is something that I can just really sit and it calms me more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's how I got into true crime. So I would like you to tell me now, Tara, how did you get
So basically when I'm not going to get into the full story here because I'm still kind of like processing how I'm going to like talk about it. But when I was about 9 years old, in my immediate family, we had a true crime thing happen in our family that became a national news story. So we had like the media knocking on the door, the media, following my mom to my Girl Scout meetings and stuff like that. And I think at one point we were actually like a 2-page like article in Star magazine. So it was kind of like a big deal when I was 9. So I became the kid that was ostracized at school because a lot of parents didn't want their kids hanging out, anywhere near my family and that kind of thing. I had the perspective of being on the side of, the perpetrator, I guess,
Mhm.
but then also still having sympathy for, the victims of my family member. So for me also, like you said, it was the psychological thing where I have always tried to figure out what led my family member to do those things, because by all accounts everyone loved this person, and they just volunteered so much of their time helping people. So it seemed like so bizarre that they would actually do the opposite. So the psychological part really interested me and fascinated me. And then when I went into college, I wanted to become a different type of reporter, because a lot of reporters, when they came to our door, were very like emotionless. They didn't care about, the question hurting your feelings. It was just like matter of fact, like more cold than I could possibly ever do. So I always wanted to kind of go a little bit deeper. I would like to sit down and actually speak to some of these criminals to kind of understand it more, so as to potentially help people more and understand red flags more. That is kind of my goal. And also, why I'm into true crime too is just that a lot of them are the victim stories. And why I started my channel too is not only to do like the whole film thing I've always wanted to do, and the writing and the documentary kind of thing I've always wanted to do, analyzing the psychological aspect of this, but it's also a way to actually get the victim's story out. It's actually a way to tell their story and honor their story. But I remember years ago just listening to so many podcasts and realizing that I was spending like 90% of my day constantly following trials, listening to podcasts. And I'm like, of course, why don't I do something like this myself? Because it's what I'm ingesting all day long. So, but yeah, I mean, that's why I'm into true crime. I'm very close to it. So, okay. So the next question I have for you is, what's the one true crime story that's really stuck with you that keeps popping into your head?
So the one that is straight to the forefront of my mind is, like I said a moment ago, Jack the Ripper. I was obsessed with that story as a kid. I have been to the Jack the Ripper Museum in Whitechapel in London, which is quite interesting. They have a lot of different, artifacts and things, and they've even got a letter that Jack sent in his own handwriting. So that was quite cool to see. But the one thing about this story that always stuck with me, and the reason that I think I was so obsessed with it, is because no one really ran that sort of detection very well at all, because these people were sex workers. So they were on the lower rungs of what the police classed as sort of important people, which is sad. It still happens to this day. Um, but the one thing that I kind of always thought about, and I've always had a theory about, and people don't tend to agree with me very often, but I make people think, is the police never once even thought, never even like assumed that that Jack the Ripper could have been Jackie the Ripper. It could have been a woman.
Yeah.
And people don't, everyone always says to me like, no, no, no. And then they think about it and they're like, oh, actually, because who would you have felt most safe with as a woman? Another woman. So yeah, that sticks in my head quite a lot. Do you have a story, a true crime story that's straight in your head? As soon as you think about the one that stays with you, what do you think of?
I automatically think of the Scott Peterson, Lacey Peterson case. I mean, it happened in 2003, and I remember seeing footage of him and never really like delving into the case at all. And then as I was like figuring out what true crime case to start my channel with, I was like, okay, let me think of a case that, is the person is still appealing, right? Because then it's interesting. And then there's people kind of having a conversation about what they think. Like, was he really innocent or guilty kind of thing? And he keeps appealing it. So I'm like, let me look into this case. And I actually started reading the trial transcript. With the Scott Peterson case, a lot of people think the trial was televised and it wasn't. They just think that they saw it because it was literally all over the news. It was like worldwide news all the time because it occurred during like Christmas break or Christmas time. But I always thought that he did it. I always thought it was so obvious that he did it going by how the media presented it. So for my channel, I'm like, let me look at these trial transcripts. And I mean, as I was reading the trial transcripts, I was like blown away by how, I mean, the defense really had a lot of arguments that actually made a lot of sense to me as somebody. If I were on the jury, I would be like, well, that kind of does make sense. There is reasonable doubt there. But a lot of people think certain things are what they are based on what they heard in the media. But when you actually go and read the transcripts, that's not quite what happened. And just now, the LA Innocence Project has picked up his case. So I started my channel with that. And then a lot of people were reacting to my videos. So it's kind of turned into my specialty where all of the documents that the LA Innocence Project has submitted to the court this year, I actually go through and read what was being said by witnesses. And it's actually really mind-blowing stuff. And a lot of people have been interested in hearing it. So that's the one case that always pops into my head. And I'm really going to stick with it and see what happens with it.
I feel like he might walk. If he was fishing, was he even in the area where she died?
The prosecution never explained how she died. They didn't have that information. And they admitted at the end, we don't know where she was killed. We don't know how she was killed, but we know that he did it. That was almost verbatim. Yeah. That was in their closing arguments.
Is there a body?
There was a body and there was a fetus as well because she was pregnant. But recently a fire inspector, so somebody who would have been working for the state, they came forward with the LA Innocence Project actually is working with him because an investigative journalist knocked on his door a couple years ago and said, hey, I've just learned about this burned out van that was found about a mile from the Petersons' home 12 hours after she went missing. And you were the lead investigator. What can you tell me about this? And then fire inspector was like, I have been waiting for 20 years for somebody to ask me about that because I was shocked that when the trial was happening, the defense never called me as a witness. Nobody called me. And he says his story is that he was the first person called on the scene to this, burned out van. And when he lifted the gas can that was left, there was a perfect round underneath the gas can, preserved bloody part of the mattress. So he said he called the police chief over and there was a couple of officials there. And on the spot, he had like a DNA presumptive test, I guess, and it came up presumptive positive for human DNA. He said at the scene, everybody knew or was thinking this might have something to do with Lacey Peterson because it had just happened and they were looking for this missing woman, right? So he said he took that sample to the Department of Justice, I think it is, to get it tested again, but he found it puzzling that the defense never called him because this could be evidence that they could argue during trial that possibly somebody else did something with Lacey because nobody else was killed or missing in that area. So whose blood is that? Like no one came forward. So the journalist passed him off the police file. And then fire inspector was like, wait a minute, there's all these photos missing. There should be photos of a bloody mattress. And the journalist was like, oh my God, what do you mean? So they went back to the police. The police were like, we don't have that. We don't have any of that evidence. So then the journalist had to go to an anonymous source who then gave these bloody mattress photos, which just came out in the media this year. But the problem that I have with it, this is a long-winded answer. In this country, I don't know if you guys have it over there, but that's called a Brady violation. And what it is the prosecution should have handed this over to the defense said, we have to give you this because this is something that, your client could argue his side that he's innocent. But this was withheld. The photos were hidden. And even the state's own fire inspector is puzzled about why it was hidden. And they're claiming it was just lost. And then also the DNA sample was incorrectly marked negative for human DNA. So when he passed it off as presumptive positive, which included photos of the positive result, they mislabeled it. So to me, it is a Brady violation. So when Scott Peterson's team found out about these bloody mattress photos and that this was even a thing because they were never told, he had been asking the prosecution for 2 years and they still denied him access. So when people talk about the Scott Peterson case, most people don't know that this is new stuff that just came out this year, which is why the LA Innocence Project came forward to argue that this is crap.
It's not right.
This is not right. This is not the way the country is supposed to work.
Hidden something that could quite easily be proven, make him proven innocent. You don't want to be seen as the guy who missed the guy who actually killed this woman.
So that case always pops into my head. And I feel like the more I read about it and the more information that comes out every day just blows my mind. Okay, so next question is, what true crime story enrages you the most? Like makes you super duper angry?
So, I mean, every true crime story can make you angry. There's a lot. There is a lot. But if there is the one that sticks out to me is the James Bulger case in the UK. So it wasn't very televised as such. I think it was quite big in Europe, but I'm not sure if it actually made its way across to America or not. But what had happened, it was on the 12th of February in 93. So I was born in 93, but in September. So it happened before I was born. And there was a little boy called James Bulger, and he was in a shopping mall in England with his mum. And then he vanished. No one knew where he was. They checked the CCTV cameras and they saw him walking away with 2 very young boys. I think they were 10 or 11 or something. And they took James to a train station, like an older station, because obviously health and safety nowadays, it's much better. And they tortured this little boy, absolutely tortured him to the point where they made it look like he'd been hit by a train before he was even hit by a train. I have no words. There's nothing comes out of my mouth when I try to speak about this because it was just so horrific. And then the 2 boys were found out. One of them said one was the ringleader and he was just sort of going along with it and all this sort of stuff. But they both got put in sort of juvenile prison as such. They're both out now. I think one of them lives in Australia with a different name. The other one lives somewhere in Britain with a different name. I don't like that they got protected when the poor little boy didn't. That's what angers me the most about that story. So yeah, I would say the James Bulger case for me.
Okay, so for me, it would be the Susan Powell case. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the case before, but basically a woman went missing. She had 2 little boys. And, this husband claimed that he, suddenly during a snowstorm decided to take his kids camping. 2 little boys. She never turned up. But the thing that bothered me the most, it just makes me so mad about the case is, he went to court. I'll just shorten the whole thing, but he went to court and lost the ability to see his children. He lost custody. So he would have to have supervised visits with, it's called CPS over here, Child Protective Services. It's so horrible. There's a 911 call of this CPS worker who went to the house to have this supervised visit with the 2 children and their father. And the father just grabs the kids in the house. And this CPS worker calls 911 to say, something's wrong. This father who just lost custody grabbed the kids. That wife is missing. It's all over the news. And this 911 operator is so infuriating with kind of just like not taking it seriously and thinking it wasn't a life. Like he was just so confused and asking a million questions. And she's like, "Are you sending somebody?" He's like, "No, our officers have to go to life-threatening emergencies first." And she's like, "Well, this is life-threatening." Well, I won't go too deep into the story, but the children did lose their lives, and it was preventable, and it's just infuriating. And the body of the woman was never found, Susan Powell. She actually made a videotape just and told many people and wrote a note. And she's like, if anything happens to me, he did it. Like he did something to me.
Yeah.
So it just infuriates me that those children could have been saved
Yeah. And they just,
and they lost their lives because he was just psycho, controlling, like
oh,
sociopath. Yeah. Just makes me so mad.
mm.
Um, so what case do you think that someone might be innocent and everyone disagrees with you on?
I'm gonna get it for this. I know I am. I always do.
That's
But
okay.
the one person, I mean, we might even do a podcast on it in the future. I don't know. But the one person that I would say is, innocent is, it's O.J. Simpson. Just the timeline of everything, and when you really sort of delve into it and look and everything, I can't figure out how he would have had time to do all of the things that they said that he'd done,
Right.
then get back to where he was, then come back to find them and everything. It doesn't make any logical sense unless he's got a time traveling machine. To me, it doesn't make sense. So
Right.
that was mine. Do you have any that you think, against the grain, that are innocent?
Yeah. And I don't know if I would say I think he's factually, like actually innocent, but I'm going to go back to Scott Peterson again, where I think
Mhm.
he should have been found innocent. And I get a lot of hate for that. At one point, they actually said he was the most hated man in America. So whenever I do create any kind of content where I actually know information that I've actually done research on, and so has the LA Innocence Project and their team of lawyers, somehow people think they know more than his lawyers and witnesses. It's I've gotten used to it where I don't mind. Again, I think that goes back to me having to deal with like media myself, where they were like knocking on my door and talking about my family members. So I really don't care about others' opinions about them hating on me or whatever for thinking the way I think. But yeah, I would say that I think a lot of people hate me for that, but I don't really care.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
our own opinions on things, and everyone's allowed their own opinion.
Sure. Oh, they hate this. They hate Scott Peterson
Yeah,
probably more than OJ. Yeah. That's
yeah. I do get a lot of online hate and things, and like you say, 9 times out of 10, it's from people that haven't done as much looking into and delving deep as I have. So it's
right.
like, oh, if you don't know all the facts, you can't build a
Right.
real sort of overview of something.
Exactly. So another question I have for you is, do you find that you're more anxious when you watch like true crime stuff, or yeah, like when you research this kind of thing, does it make you more anxious? And then how do you cope with that? The anxiety or stress or
Um,
sadness?
it's when I mean we're not frontline people, we don't see the homicides up close and things. We just see pictures and videos or whatever. Um, it depends on the story, I think, because there has been some in the past that really do scare me, such as the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez.
Oh yeah.
He frightened me mainly because his sort of modus operandi, or whatever you want to call it, he didn't specifically go for, like with people with brown hair, people with blonde hair, people with this, people with that. He just went for anyone. So literally, every single person was a potential victim to this guy, and that is terrifying to think. Um, Sometimes I listen to true crime stuff and it calms me down. It gives me the opposite effect. Or if I'm cleaning, or if I'm trying to sleep or something, I'll stick some true crime on and be like, oh, let's listen to this one. So I think depending on the story, um, when I have to sort of take myself back out of it and say, like this, I'm out of work now, as it was, like looking into something, I have to take a break. I have to come away from it and, not have any connection with it for an hour or so, just so that my head doesn't start to swivel. But yeah,
Mhm.
some can cause anxiety. Some I just sort of go to sleep on. So it's totally different. I don't know. What about
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, I think that most of the time I'm always like imagining my children being in the scenario of what
Mm,
I'm researching or what I'm hearing about. And that can stress me out. And I find myself like crying. But then I get
mm,
really sad too for the victims. Like I get really, when I actually sit down and I write their story or I write things about their lives, it's super upsetting. And like I do sometimes have to take like weeks off. Like after I finish writing a case and recording and editing and everything that I do with it, I do have to like take a break because it's like too upsetting. I don't understand how people on the front lines, like you said, I,
mm,
I wouldn't be able to handle that. I could not handle that. I couldn't even handle like asking people questions as a media person, like in the moment.
yeah.
But then I realized, like, once I realized, okay, like I feel like I have to tell this story for this victim, then I'm able to again pick it up again. Or if it's a case that makes me very angry, that
Yeah.
gives me enough energy to be like, okay, I have to write about this because this is just infuriating.
Yeah.
Um, but the only way I can just cope with it is just kind of like unplugging, like
Mm,
unplugging, getting away from it, going out with my kids and just enjoying them and being grateful because that's one thing that I do find with doing the true crime stuff is I find myself more grateful every
mm,
day that like that I've been lucky to not be in a situation where I've known someone that's been murdered or anything like that has happened to them. So I mean, knock on wood, but I do feel for these families and it is really hard to like
mm,
just imagine like dealing with what they have to deal with and being with them in the moments that they're dealing with it.
mhm,
Because that's something I know that we talked about wanting to do here on this show and like on my show too, is just kind of like talking through
mhm.
the victims' families and helping tell their stories, I guess.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of sit with that kind of grief, you know?
I'm
But I
very
think,
empathic as well, so
yeah,
mm,
exactly.
yeah, I get the
That's what
I
it
feel
is.
feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but I do have to unplug, but then it's again, I feel like I have to pick it up again when I realize that like I really have to do it for to be a voice for somebody. So
Right. Okay, so now for the last question. Is there any killers that you sympathize with?
yes, and I just did this case on my channel recently. I would say Eric and Lyle Menendez, and I researched that case and I covered it a few months ago. They're another case where they're still like appealing and their case is still like active.
Mhm.
But I just remember like the media mocking them, like when
Mm.
the trial was going down. I remember kind of like going through channels and like landing on it and being like disinterested with watching the trial. But I just remember like everyone was making fun of them, like
Yeah.
for crying on the stand or whatever it was. But when I wrote the script for my video, when I researched it and I realized there was like, I think it was like 48 witnesses or something like that that
Yeah.
testified to the abuse, like it really was going on.
Mhm.
And now they have like one of the Menudo members came forward and said that he was also drugged and I don't know if we could say raped, but he was
Um,
drugged and taken advantage of, essayed by Jose Menendez. Now that we have that information, it's going to be interesting to see what the judge decides because I think they're in appeal like right now. They're waiting for the judge to get back to them. But that case I just found so interesting because I feel like they actually were a precursor to like the whole Me Too thing where they actually got people were making fun of them at the time. But I feel like that spoke to so many actual victims of that at the time because we hadn't seen that before. I heard somewhere else that that was before like the whole priest scandal came out and
mhm.
it was before the Me Too movement, but people just weren't used to like seeing that kind of raw emotion and that kind of the stories they were telling people I guess didn't think they really went on, I guess.
Mm.
But I feel like they paved the way to how people I guess are more likely to speak out now
So they've
because
changed
they
the
bore
history.
the brunt, I guess, of societal ridicule or however you want to put it. But I feel like they actually just spoke to so many people by what they did.
Yeah.
And I do believe they were victims. I still don't think it was right what they did, but I really do believe they feared Jose. And I believe that when you're a victim of that level of abuse, you do have PTSD and you might really think that they are going to kill you, because I think we do know their parents did have weapons in the house.
Yeah.
So, and that was proven in trial. So they really could have thought that their parents were going to kill them first. So I do feel bad for them.
Yeah. I mean, with I'd probably say the same case, but mainly because like after years and years and years of taking all that different abuse and essay and all the different stuff, everybody's got a breaking point. And I don't think you can like I don't know how to explain this. I don't think we can blame them for something that I mean we can blame them as such because they did do it. But like you said, with PTSD and various different mental health issues, it's a very blurred line of, you know, if it's me or you, it's going to be you kind of situation. And I think fear creates savagery, and
Yeah.
they did fight back. But I don't
Yeah.
think they should be penalised for it as such because they took a lot to get to that stage. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I think it should have been a manslaughter. They call it here. I don't know what they call it over there, where
yeah,
you do
manslaughter.
go to prison. Yeah. I mean, because somebody, I forget who said this, but they were just saying if that would have been two daughters that were raped and abused by their father, and they knew their father had a gun and they killed their father and mother, would they have gotten convicted of murder in the first, whatever it was? I don't remember what they were. Was it first degree? I don't know. Very unlikely. It would have been manslaughter, and it would have been maybe 20 years, something like that. Whatever Gypsy Rose Lee served. She's the one that just got, I think she just got she just got released.
The problem with her is they have glorified her so much. They've made her a TikTok star. They've made her a YouTube star. They're starting to become a pattern of young people murdering just to get their name in lights.
Yeah.
Right then, guys, that's the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. We have had a blast, and we hope you join us on the next Darkly Dubious Diaries. I am Dayna.
And I'm Tara Marie. And be sure to like, subscribe, and comment, and find us on Facebook, TikTok, all the platforms at Darkly Dubious Diaries.
Should we do a bye?
Yeah.
We do this? What do you want to do?
Should we say something? Because I always say at the end of every show, be careful out there. Watch your ass. We don't want to curse too much, but
say it in a way that they don't know if we're saying watch your ass or wash your ass.
Both of them are necessary. At least for this show. We hope to see you soon.
And remember, when you're walking home at midnight on your own, remember. Da, da, da.
Oh.